Okay, another little podcast, and maybe I'm getting a little bit more used to doing these. I don't know, maybe not. I was asked a question. I made a statement in one of my other podcasts about Jesus, saying that he wasn't, for me, the only way to get to God. To me, Jesus is a remarkable gateway to God experience, both as a human being and the message that he taught, but also as a mythos, as Christ. He's a gateway to God experience, but not the only one. Now, I have to be careful because, you can't make statements like that and then expect them to go unnoticed. And I sometimes forget that some of the things I've written and say are very, very controversial and radical to some people. So now I know that these things, they go in a flash, and already I'm probably 1 minute into this. So I'm going to be very disciplined. I'm going to read something which explains a little bit about where I'm coming from. It's from the book Jesus Through Pagan Eyes, which is not out till next June. But this is a little bit. So it says this: don't be shocked. We need to begin our journey with a naked Jesus, a Jesus stripped of his Christian clothing. Now, what I mean, begin our journey, the journey that I've set up as to get back to the Jesus, the Jesus who was there way before the church was there, the Jesus who was probably a very humble, possibly even illiterate Jewish man of the northern area of what we now call Israel. So, don't be shocked. We need to begin our journey with a naked Jesus, a Jesus stripped of his Christian clothing. He demands it. And when we've done that, we must resist the temptation of reclothing him with a Da Vinci Code imagination. He requires brute honesty at this stage, not fantasy. There will be plenty of time for mythology later, all those wonderful legends about a Jesus who travelled to India, Egypt, or even here to Britain. They're beautiful tales which can impart the deepest truths, but they are not provable history, so we must put them aside for one moment. This book must begin with facts, and as we'll soon see, with regard to Jesus of Nazareth, there are not many that we can be certain of. However, once we've uncovered what we can and disentangled the historical man from the many layers of theological interpretation, we can then begin to do two things. One, we can get to know the man, the real person who challenged the political and religious world around him, a man who lived 2,000 years ago in a Jewish backwater of the Roman Empire. And two, we can remove the negative layers of literalized mythology which have quenched the spirit of the man himself, and rather turned him into something he never was. Then we might be better able to create a useful mythology that actually uplifts and inspires, rather than burdens and cripples with guilt. I started this project as a personal quest, an opportunity to try to understand Jesus in the light of my pagan encounters. I wanted to push back the boundaries and ask myself honestly who I thought he was. But something strange has happened during all the intense research. I've met not one but three different figures of Jesus. It's not that I'd never come across them before, but that they were always part of the one central personality known to me as Jesus Christ. I'm not referring to what Christians call the Holy Trinity. I'm referring to three separate religio-spiritual personalities. Number one, the human Jesus of Nazareth. Number two, the divinized Jesus Christ of the Church, whom a lot of scholars have referred to as the Christ of faith, and others as the post-Easter Jesus. And three, the universal, mythic or cosmic Christ. Now this is where we come to that statement that I made about Jesus, the way, the truth and the life. And no one shall come to the Father but by me, through me. And I said in another podcast that I don't take that literally. That's because that comes from John's Gospel, and we're almost certain, well, if you're a critical scholar of the liberal tradition, that is Christ talking, not Jesus talking. Now this is where we have to be a little bit careful, and I have to be very careful in how I explain this, but there is a difference in the parts of the Bible, the New Testament, where it is talking about Jesus as a historical figure, and the what I would call the more divinized pictures, stories about the Christ, which has a certain amount of mythology and symbolism attached, which the people who wrote the stories back then were very used to doing. You only have to look at other similar kind of cultures around that area, and there are hundreds of stories that sound very similar to the kind of things that were said about Jesus. For example, the birth narratives and the wise men and everything else. You know, some of the Easter narratives. So what has clearly happened is that we have this remarkable man, this life-changing man, this energetic and shell-shocking iconoclast Jesus, and the experience that his belief in his God gave to him and then sort of spilled out into others. And then after his death we have this continuing relationship with him, and we don't really know what happened. Something incredible happened because his energy, his essence seemed to live on. And then you have the emerging church and the stories that have become what we would call the Gospels, which were part history and part mythology. And what we've done, or what possibly Christianity has allowed to happen, is a literalization of what is basically mythology. So I think it's perfectly acceptable to understand Jesus Christ in terms of Son of God and this kind of language, but it's metaphor. It's metaphor. That's how I understand it. Yes, I'm quite happy with the language of Jesus as Son of God, as the incarnate embodiment of God. But I would see that as a symbol of what is true for all of us too. And that's where I think we have some links to the pagan traditions. And I'm looking at the clock ticking, and I haven't even begun yet, but I'm going to have to close now because we're not going to get this all onto YouTube. So I know this has probably opened up another can of worms, but I might well just say a little bit more about this later. But I hope that didn't confuse. It could probably confuse me actually. No, it didn't really. I hope that helped a little bit. But if there are any other questions, just PM me and I'll try my best to answer. Thank you.